and they hung these lights from the ceiling. So
Was it like a dance?
no, it was a party for our business partners that we have annually. And anyway.
Well, fun.
Yeah. Where would you like to start today?
I sat all the way here and was thinking, what should we talk about? Let's see. Let's talk about, well, it's always easy for me to talk about work. There's lots going on there. We did have an interesting, I felt, okay, yesterday we had our staff meeting, and I did feel, I was proud of myself, because in the staff meeting we talked about reading this book called Canoeing the Mountains, which is about Lewis and Clark and their partnership, and how they had to go, how they were sent to do a mission, but then that mission ended up being wrong because they actually didn't know it was, you know, across the Rockies or anything like that. They thought they would get to a certain place and it would be this, and it wasn't. And so the idea is that in the church right now, we're going to have to be more like Lewis and Clark and canoe off the mountain, canoe over the mountains or whatever. That we're going to have to be adaptive in our leadership and creative and stuff like that. And so the book, we're reading it as a staff, and right now the section that we focused on was adaptive leadership. And part of adaptive leadership was that you had to be like competent in 3 areas. You had to have the trust of each other and of the congregation, and then you had to care and love for the congregation. And so we talked a lot about trust yesterday, which was hard because I knew I had to be honest about where, if anything was to be done in that time together, we had to be honest about what we were feeling. And so I was really proud of myself because I was pretty bold and said, instead of just being quiet, I was like, you know, I do have issues with trust among the staff. But then I also named that it's like a lot of times my trust issues stem from my need to be seen in a certain way, and my desire to put forth what I think somebody wants me to be. So I said, so sometimes, a lot of times what will happen is a break of trust will occur, and it's more about how that person sees me than about, like, I don't know, I explained it pretty well yesterday, and so I felt really good about that. And then I was nervous that people were going to come back and be like, yeah, you do that all the time, you know, but it wasn't. Then Angela went and shared that, and this was really eye-opening for me. She shared that she wanted to be able to talk in staff meetings about parishioners without the fear of being told stuff like, well, you know, we have to love them, or told like, oh, you can't, you know, talk about that, which Jim does often to her. You know, she'll bring up a complaint, that an issue she's having with a person, and he'll say stuff like, now, Angela, you know that blah, 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 like very fatherly and patronizing, but doesn't really like let her express herself. And it really dawned on me in our meeting yesterday that, like, Jim and I have clergy peer groups. Like, I have two that I go to regularly, and then a good friend that I meet with weekly to talk through. I have this, and she has nothing like that. And so I can't imagine how isolating and how hard it would be to not have anywhere to process anything. And we talked a lot about anxiety. It was really funny because Jim started talking about, like, oh, do you remember this book that we read when I first came here? He's been there for like 10 years. He was like, and it talked about anxiety and a system. And I was like, oh, are you talking about Bowen Family? And he was like, yeah. And so we talked about how, you know, anxiety is passed through a system, and he thinks that, you know, you can just watch our church and see the anxiety pass from group to group, from staff to lay people, to lay people to other lay people, and then back up to staff, and just how we like share it with each other. And I really think it's because, like Angela said, one thing I think might happen is if Angela doesn't feel like she can speak in our staff meetings and speak frankly and openly and without fear of being reprimanded for her feelings, then she finds somewhere else to do that. And I also know that Angela has, and she would say this herself, little to no friends outside of the church. And so who are the people that you're going to go do it with? Church people, who are then going to go and share it with their friends. And so, no, I'm not saying all the anxiety is because of her. That is not true.
Sure.
But I do see how that would create like such a, I mean, first off, that would be a really big triangle. And then, but a great way to funnel anxiety through the church, whether or not, she recognizes it. So I really hope that Jim can honor that, and that in moments like that I can be bold to say, Jim, you're not letting Angela speak what she needs to speak, and we just need to sit and listen and be supportive of her. I really hope that we can create that space for her, because if I didn't have all my spaces to air my concerns and to reflect with people, I'd be miserable. I would just be a horrible person to work with. So it was really good to hear that her lack of trust among the staff was kind of, I interpreted it to kind of be more with Jim than with myself. So that was very, I'm feeling more positive about our relationship. And I don't know if I shared I think I told the guys, or maybe in our class, I'm not sure, but last week, Angela and I were talking, and she said something like, we were just, having a good conversation, and she said, I really feel like you threw me under the bus in a meeting the other day, like a church council meeting, and I was like, oh my gosh, I am really sorry. And you know what, I thought that, and then I said, but I'm an overthinker, and I think a lot about people's emotions, so I thought maybe I actually didn't do that, and I was reading too much into it. So I was like, I'm very sorry that I did that, and I'll try not to do it again. And then I sent her a follow-up email later that day and just wanted to reiterate that I was sorry, and that, it's my goal for us to be a team and to work together, especially as we go into this new season. She wrote back, and she was like, I shouldn't even have mentioned it. It really wasn't that big of a deal. You didn't need to send an email. And I was like, okay. But it made me, I don't know, I felt like it was good for me to write out what I was thinking and just to tell her, I'm trying very hard to work as a team with you. So even though she was like, yeah, you way emotioned this up to where it didn't, too many emotions, we didn't need all that. But I was proud of myself for, I don't know, I was proud that I was able to apologize in the moment and not get didn't cry or get upset about it. I didn't feel really guilty. I was just able to say, yeah, you know what, I did do that, and I thought about apologizing earlier, but I was afraid I was overthinking it, and I'll try not to do that again. And then I was happy that I was able to follow up with an email. So I feel like CP really is helping me in my workplace be more bold, and just be less afraid of, be more empowered about helping myself, and therefore less afraid of what it might do to others. Not like I'm going around intentionally trying to damage people or anything, but I think it's my tendency to not speak up for myself for fear of how it might hurt someone else, I'm not doing that as much anymore. I'm pretty happy with that.
Oh, I'm curious, with you speaking up in the staff meeting, I wonder if you were able to observe in the moment what you were feeling and thinking before you started that behavior.
Well, I was feeling nervous. I felt like I needed to say something, and I could feel I'd been wearing this coat because it was cold outside, and I thought that the library where we meet was cold. And then afterwards, and Angela had been saying, aren't you hot? Before I even made these statements, she's like, aren't you hot? I'm burning up. And everybody else was like, yeah, it's kind of warm in here. And I was like, no, I'm cold. But then after that, I took my coat off, and I was like, oh, I'm hot now. And they all laughed, and I was like, it's because I was sharing, emotions. And, yeah, I was just, I could feel like my face getting red and stuff like that, but I think I was nervous that I know sometimes I get nervous to say things because I feel like Jim and Angela and a lot of our lay people are very particular with their words. Like, words are really important to them. And so they'll latch onto a phrase or really dig into something where you're like, okay, you're like, for me, it's like, my words, of course words are important, but I don't know, when I'm listening to someone, I'm listening to, like, the larger message, but sometimes they'll get sidetracked on, like, a little phrase, and so I get nervous when I speak up because I'm afraid, like, oh, what if they just get, tear me apart because of this one little phrase. So I was nervous about that, but it didn't happen, and, yeah. And I guess if that did happen, now I would hope that I would say, like, I really feel like you're not hearing, like, what I'm saying, that you're just latching onto this one thing. What I really want you to hear is this. But.
Okay. Were you conscious of the words you were choosing to speak? I mean, was that thought out, or did it just...
No. And I'm pretty good at Nate. I tried in this last meeting to name that, and when I apologized to Angela, I named that too. I was like, sometimes as an extrovert, like as myself, I just have to talk to get to my point, and I was like, and I recognize that's really annoying, and I'm really sorry I can't do it in my head like the rest of you can, but sometimes I just am speaking to be able to verbalize what I'm feeling. And so I think they know that about me. And sometimes I'll say stuff, and at the end I'm like, you know what? That was not cohesive, and I would wish they please, like, disregard all I just said, which happened, like, later in the meeting. I was like, sorry, I think I was just trying to process something, and I did it out loud with you all. And they're, they laugh, and they're like, okay, that's fine. But, yeah, I don't think I knew what I wanted to say. I don't know if I was like, I'm going to use this phrase and make sure I say this or anything. I just was trying to get across the point that I have trust issues with them, and often broken trust lies in the thought that they're perceiving me in a certain way that I don't want to be perceived. And so I want to work to end that perception. I mean, that's a lot. But.
Yeah, I was just curious if you had, like, a guiding principle, in serious conversations. I'm going to use I language. And
oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I definitely use I language.
Right.
And I mean, in that time, I made it about myself. It was not about, like, what you all do or anything. It was my need to be seen the way I perceive what other people are putting off. Like, I read things into stuff. Yeah, definitely use I language. And Jim will call us out if we don't use I language. So, yeah, I'm definitely an I language person. And what was I going to tell you? And I think in that moment, what I really was thinking was, in order for this staff, in order for my experience at Leesburg to be good, I just have to be honest. Even if I flub it up, like, I need to attempt to be authentic and to share, what's really going on, because the situation's not going to get any better if I hide. If I'm given the opportunity to share truth and I don't share it, my situation there is not gonna get any better. But if I'm given the opportunity to speak truth and to be honest, I need to, as much as I can, take that, as much as I can be bold, take that opportunity. Whether or not doesn't matter if anybody else in the room takes that opportunity, but in order for me to be in a healthy place, I need to take the opportunity to say, here's how I'm really feeling about this. So, and I've been trying. It's not always fun because nobody else really does it that well. And that's okay. I can't force anybody else to be where I am or force anyone else to share what's going on in their life. But I don't know. Although yesterday, Angela, I kind of opened up with like, here's my trust issues, and then she shared her piece. So it is hard. I wish you could be like a fly on the wall in those staff meetings, because when Jim starts asking us questions, you can just feel everybody's just body like, oh, I don't want to do this with these people. Like, you can just feel it.
What sort of questions is he asking?
He's asking, like, what do you have to lay aside in order to, what do you as a staff person have to lay aside in order to, venture off the map, which is like the phrase or whatever, or what issues of trust do you have in the church? What other, what areas do you see have trust issues? It was good because we started off, he did start like big picture and then kind of focus in on us, which I think was nice, as opposed to like starting with us and then getting big picture. I mean, he asked like, do you see issues of trust in the church? And all of us were like, oh yeah. And he was like, okay, where do you see them? We named a few different places, but we didn't name ourselves. And so he was like, okay, so among the staff, do you see issues of, trust here? And nobody said anything. He's like, I kind of feel like sometimes we do have issues with trust. And so then we were all like, fine. We'll see.
So he does offer and model answers to his own questions.
Mm-hmm,
okay.
He does.
All right.
But you can also tell he's like digging and kind of waiting for us to answer, which is good. I mean, it's good that he answers the hard questions, but not as fully as the rest of us do. I think he really sees himself as moderator, which is weird because he is, but he isn't. Like, he is moderator, but he's also staff, so it's not like he is a part of the problem too. So I don't know if he sees that though. But
Well, I'm wondering if you could
sorry.
sort of return the question to him and say, I'm just curious of what role you think you play in the anxiety among the staff.
Mhm. Yeah.
Going back to the apology.
Mhm.
If you are aware that that her feeling was accurate, I think the verbal apology was okay. I'm just curious of why you felt the need to
Well,
follow up with
I
an
felt the
email.
need to follow up, not really to apologize again, but just to, because in the moment it was just kind of like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, and then we like moved on in the conversation. So I didn't really feel like the need to apologize again. I just wanted to circle back and say like, hey, we had this moment of apology, and I just want to be clear, as we move forward in this transition, that I want us to be a team, and so I kind of was like adding stuff that I didn't get to say in the conversation. I'm here for you. I want us to be a team. Like, basically saying like, hey, I was also trying to recognize like our relationship is not what we like to pretend it is. I don't know if she read all that into it, but actually I know she didn't, because she was like, why did you send this email? But for me, and I mean it might have been honestly a little bit selfish in terms of I just felt like I needed to get more off of my chest, and I know I sent it because after I apologized, it was still bothering me. Like, I was still thinking about it, like, an hour or 2, 3 hours after it happened. And so I was like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to send an email, and then we're going to be done with it. And it really did help me be done with it. Once I was able to send the email, talk a little bit about trust, I was able to say, like, I stopped thinking about it. And when she wrote back and was like, you didn't need to do that, like, wasn't a big deal, that didn't even bother me. I was like, oh, okay.
Okay, so I see. So you were not really expecting anything back from her.
Right, not at all. No, so, I mean, either way it would have been fine if she wrote back and was like, oh, thank you, well, I'm glad that we, but the fact that she wrote back and said, it was, you're kind of making a mountain out of a molehill. I was like, okay, whatever. For me, it was about being done in my head with that situation. I had covered my bases.
Do you think you were making a mountain out of a molehill?
No, I don't actually think that. I think my apologizing to her face to face and then following up with an email isn't making a mountain out of a molehill. And for me, it had, like, when she brought it up, it had happened maybe, like, it might have been the first time she had, like, seen me since it happened, but it had still happened, like, 5 days ago or something like that. And so, for me, it was surprising that she brought it up, one, because I thought I was overthinking it beforehand, and then two, she just doesn't bring stuff up like that very often, right? Like, she's not a very, like, forthcoming with her emotions, and she's not very, as much as she doesn't shy away from conflict, she also doesn't, like, she doesn't shy away from conflict in the moment. However, I don't think she seeks it out either. Like, she's not going to be a person that comes around the corner and is like, you did this to me, and blah, 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 blah. Like, that's just not her. And that's not what she did in that moment. She just literally said in the statement, you kind of threw me under the bus last week, don't you think? And so for me, I was like, wow, this is out of the ordinary for her to do something like that. And it's also probably why I followed up with an email. So I don't think I'm making a mountain out of a molehill.
Okay.
I think it was a big deal for her to bring that up to me. And I think probably also in the email I was just acknowledging, like, oh, yeah, that's what the other thing I said in the email was, like, if you have an issue with me, I'm, like you did today, I'm really thankful you brought that to my attention because I want to face those things so that we can be partners. Yeah, that's definitely the language I used. And so, I don't think I was making a mountain out of a molehill at all. And I don't think my follow-up email was bad or anything like that. I don't feel any regret in doing it. It did a lot of things for me, so.
I mean, I'm just curious about the language of your response to it, and then I'm curious about her language back. And when she said you threw me under the bus, I hear that's a fairly significant.
Yeah, that's
an emotion-laden statement.
Phrase, yeah.
And then you apologized twice, and then she comes back and says, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. So I'm just curious what you do with those mixed messages.
It was very Angela to send those mixed messages. I mean, I've seen her with other people display emotion, and then when somebody responds to that emotion, I have her be like, you're reading into this. Like, I'm not actually. It's interesting. I definitely have seen her say, like, here's how I'm feeling, and then when somebody says, oh my gosh, that's how you're feeling, and I did that to you, I'm so sorry, she'll shut it really quick and be like, no, I'm not feeling that. Yeah, but you're like, well, 5 minutes ago you said you were feeling that, So, it's, yeah. It's definitely a her thing, and so I can't fix that for her. She's got to figure out if that's something she wants to fix. I can just do what I need to do to feel like and I think, when we talk about self-differentiation and we talk about, we can't force anybody to act a certain way or behave a certain way. Like, our behaviors are purely for ourselves. Mm-hmm. My hope is that, in apologizing to Angela and making the effort to say, like, please tell me, when I've hurt you, that over time, maybe that opening of emotion and then shutting off of emotion will stop with me. Maybe she'll just be able to say, like, oh, I can really trust Heather to take care of these emotions that I'm showing and not, I don't know what's happened in her past, but, I imagine somebody that opens himself up and then closes himself really quickly has been someone whose emotions have been kind of abused in a way, or she feels like they've been hurt in a way. Mm-hmm. So my hope is that in recognizing them and saying, like, I want to deal with these things with you, this is a worthy relationship for me, that eventually down the road she'll be able to just kind of leave that door open for maybe a little longer than an afternoon or a minute or whatever. But the only thing I can do is keep coming back to her consistently and be consistent in myself and my reaction to her. Right now I'm really having to say, with this transition, people are coming up to me and talking to me about Jim and Angela because there's so much anxiety, and it is hard not to engage, but I really have decided this week that when somebody comes up to me and they're voicing, it's hard because on the one hand, as a minister, I feel like I have to listen to their concerns and, ask reflective questions and stuff, but it is such a emotionally loaded thing for me that, like, I can't do it. And so I know that I'm going to have to say, thank you so much for bringing these concerns to me, but I just really can't engage in the way that you want me to engage. That I can't be what you need right now. And so in order to protect myself, and I can't help you right now with that.
I wonder if you could restate that in an encouraging way to encourage
Yeah.
better behavior for those folks.
Yeah, because a lot of times it's like gossipy stuff, like, oh, I don't like Angela, she's blah, blah, blah. I would love to join in on that, you know what I mean?
Right.
But, like, I can't tell them that, but I can't join in on that because it just increases the anxiety in the system. And so, I don't know. So, okay, Bill comes to me, he's like, I don't like Angela. And I say, Bill, I hear you saying these things about Angela, and I just really can't engage in a conversation like that about Angela because she is a fellow, and I'm just practicing, she's a staff member of mine, and we have to have a really good working relationship. So I encourage you to look at the wonderful things Angela does for our church, and if you want to talk again, I'd be happy to, but I really can't engage in that kind of conversation. Is that good?
Yeah, but I'm wondering if you would ever encourage them maybe to go directly to Angela.
That would nip it in the bud. Yeah, I mean, I could do that. I could say something. I really can't engage in conversation about that. We have, Angela and I, or Jim and I, have to have a good working relationship, and I'd encourage you to share any concerns that you have with them. I think they would be open and willing to talk to you about that. Yeah. That's a really good way of just squashing that. It's a good idea. Yeah, because I've been trying to, like, let people vent, and because I felt like that's what I needed to do, but that's a slippery slope for me.
Yeah,
I'm like, oh no.
So I think I would communicate less of what I can't do and more of what they can do.
Okay. So you could say something like, yeah, I hear that you're having some difficulties with this transition, and specifically kind of fears about what's going to happen with Angela, and I just really encourage you to go talk to her about that, and I know that she's open and willing to talk, so you can reach out to her. Yeah. Which is, that is good.
Which empowers them if they choose to do it, and it de-triangulizes.
And it really
you.
ends that conversation.
Yeah.
You can't. Well, maybe not for some people in my church, because they'll just keep going. In which case I'll say, you know what, I can't engage in this, and just walk away. Yeah. But for the most part, yeah. And, I had an intense conversation with one of my moms who told me she was leaving, which I told Jim about. I think 2 other families are going to leave, too, as Angela takes over. But, I mean, even in that conversation with that mom, I said, I hear you saying all this, and this might be harsh for me to say, or you might hear it as harsh, but I don't mean it this way. But when I first came, this mom in particular, it's like, you told me that you weren't very sure that you were going to stick around for me. So, I don't know if you recognize it, but you've kind of had one foot out the door since even I came here. And she was kind of like, oh, yeah, you're right, I kind of have. And I was like, so, we all want church to be a positive place, and a place where you can encounter Jesus and do what you feel Jesus is calling you to do. And if that's no longer this place, it's okay. She was just really struggling with, like, I've been Methodist my whole life, and I really thought I could outlast this, because she doesn't like Jim or Angela. She's like, I really thought I could outlast this minister, and I just don't feel like I can do it anymore. And so the conversation was, it was weird, because of course I want people to stay at our church, but it was kind of like trying to say, like, you know, I hear you saying all these things, and as a minister I know you should be feeling these things to a church. So if you're dreading coming on Sunday mornings, that might be God telling you, you know, it's okay, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is hard because she's super involved in everything at church. I mean, like, almost every single ministry area she's involved in. So it'll be a definite loss when she and her kids leave, but I think she'll be a lot happier.
You know, one of the things that strikes me, and is that we've talked about quite a few times about you and Angela, particularly, and the relationship that you don't have, and then maybe the relationship you desire.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm aware. You know, I used to say that female relationships were very complicated, and I still believe that.
Mm-hmm.
I also realized over the year that male relationships are complicated too. It's just different.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, you seem like a person who really desires to have good relationships with coworkers, and maybe in particular female coworkers. Mm-hmm. But I wonder if you step back from the emotional desire for
Mm-hmm.
that connection, well, what is the reality of a connection with Angela, do you think? I mean, what is the reality of a relationship?
So what you mean, like, what is our relationship right now? Oh,
what is possible?
Okay, so I think Heather's ideal relationship would be that we're friends and we could joke and it would be fun to go to lunch together, you know,
Yeah.
a real friendship. The reality is that's probably not going to happen. So the next thing is a working relationship, because I don't even think we have a very good working relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, a good working relationship with Angela would look like the ability of both of us to share our, you know, if we are working on some event together, the ability for both of us to share and listen to what the other person has to say, the ability to make that event successful, and the ability to respect one another, and to have whatever needs to be said between us, so it doesn't have to go back to whoever either I'm talking to. Well, I personally feel like I have enough outlets that I don't talk to lay people about it. Sometimes I struggle with that, but most of the time I'm pretty good about saying, like, nope, can't engage. Mm-hmm. I don't know that about her, and I don't mean to. It's not judgmental. I just recognize that Angela doesn't have all the same places that I do.